Yo, what's popping? We have it day 2 of week 1 of the Countdown Cup for NA. First up, the all EU matchup, maybe the last one of Overwatch League history, the Paris Eternal against the London Spitfire. Ends up being a 3-1 for London, with Paris playing Wub Maltho, Karari, Rack Attack, and Luke Mino. London playing Shaq, Sparker, Hadi, Landon, and Khan, who is making his debut as the London Spitfire player against his former team. So we have Ilios, which is 2-1 for London, but it was actually decently close. His Ruins is 199. Paris playing Sombra, Tracer, Divas, and Bap, with London playing Tracer, Sombra, Winston, Brig, Ana. Cry is getting pressured down hard with hacks and with anti-nades and damage, which happens every time he's on the Diva against the Sombra Ana. And it's looking really good for London, but they do overextend a little bit. Luke Mino had some really nice lamp to stop a dive, and Hani ends up dying, so Paris do flip the point. Sparker is able to quickly flip that back with an EMP, which just rolls the Paris backline. And then Paris, they commit a lot to a dive that fails, and then they switch over to the Brig Zen backline. And this limits Hadi's aggression pretty handedly, wins them a fight because Hadi doesn't maybe recognize that he can't go as deep. But then Luke Mino, or Rack Attack rather, he gets a little over ambitious in rally and overtime, and Khan hits him with a nade, and he gets pressured down and dies. And from there, the rest of Paris Eternal kind of crumble. So London take that map pretty decently. Next, we have Well, which is 185 for London, and London gets to 99% pretty fast because Paris is playing Echo, Tracer, Diva, Brig, Ana, and London decided to play so fast that Wub isn't really getting much value on the Echo, and Cry is still getting perma-hacked and perma-antied. And Malthel's also not getting a lot of value because Landon's pretty easily dealing with him, which leaves Hadi to wreak havoc on the Winston. They are able to flip the point when Hadi goes really deep and London reset before they come back, and then grind out a really long, grueling fight, but then once again, Sparker hits an EMP and ends up winning map 1. Then we go over to Eichenwald, which is a 2-1 victory for London, with Backbone coming in for Sparker, and we will actually never see Sparker for the rest of the series, surprisingly. Despite some hit scan performances, maybe. So, Paris playing Hanzo, Tracer, or Risa Baprig, with London playing Tracer, Sombra, Winston, Brig, Ana, and Cry is just basically being a point presence, and London are just ignoring him to kill the backline. However, Paris get a tick off the first one, and then Wub gets a nice pick on the Khan, and Cry just runs on the Landon, and they end up capping A quite easily. So it's basically Cry's just running onto an enemy if he can, or just being a nuisance on the point. After a death, though, on B, he does swap over to the Diva, and London are able to hold him for about 2+ minutes quite easily because they have access to the backline jumping off the high ground. And Paris is really struggling to pressure the London backline at all through hacks because Diva has to fly quite a long ways to get up there. And Backbone's doing a lot of work on the Sombra because he's taken over the Sombra role from Sparker and he's doing a great job. So they end up holding them there around the end of the bridge. Then we go over to London's offense, where Paris play Hanzo, Tracer, Orisa, Zembap, so no more Brig, and then London playing the same composition, but this time with a ball and a Zenyatta. And the London dive really isn't finding anything or doing anything at all. They're just kind of sitting there. Eventually, Hadi does dive up top onto the backline with a nano boost, which splits up Pride from his resources. So then they pressure down him, and once he's gone, Paris kind of crumble, and London end up capping out A after 2.5 minutes. And Maltha just doesn't hit a pulse like this entire time, and he's really struggling in this matchup going into the backline. Rack Attack swaps over to Brig now to help me deal with maybe the Tracer Sombra ball onslaught that's going on. And Tracer holds for a long time, though. They do. Paris, rather. I don't know what I just said, but yeah, Paris holds for a long time with Cry just sitting on the high ground. He's immovable. So he basically denies high ground for the entirety of the London Spitfire, so that's great. However, they do just continue to move the point, and eventually he can't stay on the high ground because they need him on the point. So he rotates to the point, and we get a really long overtime, and Cry's just not dying. However, neither is Hadi and Landon. So they're able to live long enough for Khan to come back, kill 2 on the Zenyatta, and then London get the man advantage. They end up clutching out, and Paris looked really competitive, and it looked like they were going to win out potentially, but just at the very end, no dice. Then we go over to Dorado, which is actually a 3-2 Paris win. Dove comes in for Wub, and Backbone is still in, and he is going to be playing some Widowmaker in a bit, but not right now. So on Paris's offense, they're playing Ash Tracer, Orisas, and Ana, staying on the Orisa, with London playing Tracer, Sombra, Winston, Brig, Ana still, and Cry's just absolutely getting demolished off the rip. And Paris do some really weird rotations to try and make the Orisa work because he can't move the cart and then go high ground very quickly. So he'll move the cart a bunch, then he'll rotate around to the high ground, and it's very awkward. However, once they get enough point pressure and enough space, they're able to take the high ground, then he'll drop back down. He gets a lot of free progress because London don't really want to deal with an Orisa on the point. It takes a lot of resources to do because Orisa just lived for so long. So London instead decided, you know what, we'll attack the backline. However, all that time, Cry is just content to move to point, let his backline die, which they don't very quickly. They actually live for much longer than London maybe wanted or anticipated. So London can't actually get back. They pretty much give Cry the cap and they lose the fight. At this point, Dove goes over to the Soldier and Cry goes over to the Diva because, of course, you can't just sit on cart the entire time on B. It's a little harder than that. And yeah, so Paris end up cooping up in the church as a way to try and hide from a nano boosted hottie. And when they come out, the Paris DPS get picks and they end up capping B. And then we get Dove going over to Sojourn, but Paris just don't really make any progress on C for the longest time. As London's forced back a bit eventually, and they let Paris get some progress, but they stopped them just before that last corner. Then we go over to London's offense, where we get Paris playing Widow, Tracer, Orisa, Zen, Ana, and London playing Tracer, Widow, Ball, Ana, Zen. So Backbone on the Widowmaker. Surprisingly, no Sparker. So what's going on there? I don't know, but Backbone popped off. He really did. He made a lot of progress for London throughout this map. He gets a pick on Malthel to start. He finishes off Cry. He was slept. And then the Cap A, and then he goes over it. He hits a nice jump shot on Rack, and he ends up just dueling a bunch of the supports a lot for somehow. And I don't know if there's miscommunications there. It feels like maybe Cry who switches over to the Diva after a maybe was supposed to DM them or something, and it just doesn't happen. So he just gets picked there. Um, and he ends up killing 3 ultimately in a pretty drawn out fight to prevail London into C. But it still takes Vines and a nano boost to do it. And from that point, he switches over to the Sombra, but London just don't have enough time to build ults on C because they capped a B in overtime, right? So they don't really get a time to build them up and have a comfortability using them, and Paris end up pulling strong. Then finally, we get New Queen Street, which is 106 to 85 victory for London. Paris playing Soldier, Tracer, Divas, and Ana off rip, with London playing Tracer, Sombra, Ball on a Zen. And Khan is just making plays on the Zenyatta. London firmly in the driver's seat this entire time. Hottie on the ball, rolling through the backline, getting good angles for Khan once again. Great dives. Dove switches over to the Ash, but it doesn't really matter. Eventually, gets to overtime. London honestly give Paris quite a lot by not using ultimates and forcing Paris to use them. So they're content to let them take 85 up from like almost nothing, and just wipe them at the end. So yeah, that's the first one. Then we get the Florida Mayhem against LA Gladiators, a 3-1 victory for the Glads. But honestly, Florida did impress me a bit. And Gladiators, while there's not worrying things there are still some question marks. The Florida Mayhem playing Hydron, Checkmate, Someone, Sermonjet, and Rupel, with the Gladiators playing Kevster, Happy, Reiner, Shu, and Funny Astro. Lijiang is a 2-1 for the Glads, but Gardens is going the way of the Florida Mayhem to start with 199 for Florida. So Florida playing Sombra, Tracer, Winston, Lucio, Ana, with Gladiators playing Tracer, Sojourn, Doom, Ana, Lucio. And Reiner was not getting that much value on the Doomfist on Gardens because he kept getting hacked very often. Florida was playing the house very well, so that whenever he did try to go in, it was very easy for him to get hacked and shot down. Someone was able to do a lot of work in the backline, partially because Funny Astro enjoys, being a bit of a red at Lucio at times. So he's not really playing near Shu, not really peeling that much. So someone just can kind of go to town on him, especially when when paired with Hydron hacking him out, with which was very well coordinated between someone Checkmate and Hydron. That hacks and the dive comes out, and it's very good. And we get kind of something similar to that on Night Marker, which is 100 to 99 for the Gladiators. And Reiner's still getting hacked, right? But the difference is this time, because of how far away he is from the enemy team, and because of where he wants to be, Florida's unable to capitalize on it as much, which let them use a lot of resources and gain a lot of nothing. So Gladiators re-engage with their more favorable conditions now, and they do that quite often. They end up being on the better end of it. Eventually, Florida does figure out, maybe we shouldn't even bother targeting the Doomfist. We'll go for the backline. It works out much better. But at that point, Gladiators have a lot more alts. They get a lot more value out of their alts. It just doesn't really work. But Florida, once they do shift and dive on the backline a bit harder, it continues to go really crazy. Checkmate gets a nice 2K stick. And it was very close. They almost won the map completely because in overtime, Nano Reiner has to touch the point, and he gets very low, but he ends up clutching up, getting a big damage, getting a lot of shields, and he basically 1v3s on the point to live and wait for reinforcements. So Reiner does a lot there to keep the Gladiators in it, and they end up winning off of that play. Then we get the Control Center, which is 100 to 25 for the Gladiators, and this is just kind of a roll. Both teams playing Mace, and Ryan, Bap, Lucio, and Reiner, he's swatting at Jed, and then he ends up dying. But after that, it's all Gladiators all day. They're doing a really good job of setting Happy up for success to get the angles onto the backline he needs to. First, by setting him up on the high ground and then running in, and then by using a Kevster Blizzard to separate someone from his backline to give Happy free reign and to shoot at the squishies with no shield. With the bonus of splitting Rupel's blizzard or window away. But yeah, great stuff for the gladiators on the Ron composition. Then we go over to King's Row, which is a 3-0 for the gladiators, and Skewed comes in for Funny Astro. So on the Gladiators offense, we get them playing a Genji Hanzo Doom on a Zen comp, and then Florida playing a Ash Tracer Winston Zen Ana. And it's pretty much just a world class performance by Shu. He hits a nice sleep on Surma Jed to instantly win A. Then he hits a sleep on Nano Someone to win out through the choke on B. Then he hits another 180 sleep on Checkmate that helped them get to C. And after that, it's not a wrap because they're rolling pretty hard, but they do get stopped on C for a bit. Reiner gets a little over ambitious on Rupel. Someone is doing gets a lot done with their primal. Um, Eventually, Reiner, gets a big charge punch, gets up on the high ground, controls that quite well. Kevzer hits a nice nano blade and kills one and forces the support in the spawn, so they do cap out with time. But it's mostly the shoe show still. Then we get the Florida Mayhem offense, which was quite sad. They're playing Ash Tracer, Winston, Bergana off the Zenyatta again, with Gladiators going to Tracer, Sombra, Doom on a Zen. So we see Happy actually play some Sombra gameplay, which isn't quite as ambitious, or not ambitious, but isn't as explosive as his Sojourn or his Widowmaker or anything else like that. But it was okay. And Flutter were really struggling to dive onto the Gladiators' backline at all. Reiner was just doing a great job disrupting the dive and setting up Shu for hitting great nades. And it also helps that Shu is the GOAT. And in the end, Florida didn't even get a single point. I don't know if they maybe got a tick, but it wasn't very much. And Reiner was really putting on a good show there. Then we get Route 66, which is another Florida win. Or not another, but a Florida win. With Florida playing Sombra, Tracer, Winston, Zen, Ana on the offense, and Gladiators playing Tracer, Sombra, Doom on a Zen on the defense. And Florida's really struggles on A. And they struggle to make a good dive onto the Gladiators' backline. Again, it's Reiner on the Doomfist, setting them up for success by kind of stopping the dive there. And also, Gladiators are really letting Hydron set up for the hack that plans the whole engagement out, especially specifically on A. Because after A, they break it through with an EMP and a nice nano checkmate carry. Then they set tempo on the B, the EMP Happy, they maintain momentum. Someone then isolates Shu with a primal, and they get through B pretty easily. But then there's Winston v. Winston. Happy gets an EMP and it gets a lot, but Reiner jumps in and dies. And from there, Florida aren't quite able to finish it out because Shu gets hacked and taken out before he can nano. But Surmajed dies. Florida decide, you know what, we'll reset, wait for this, but it doesn't really work out because now Shu's able to come back. Nano Reiner goes deep, doesn't die this time, and Florida don't really touch the point. But it is a very good pacing considering how slow their A was. Then we get the Gladiators offense, which is pretty good, but the difference here is Hydron's able to set up his engagements very well with the manual hacks or EMP. It's a great moment where Majed shranks reactively to the Happy EMP in front of him, and then Ego duels Skewed and forces his transcendence as well in a losing fight. And Florida gets a bit over aggressive, unfortunately. So Gladiators trade out, Reiner ends up living, and then from there, Gladiators, they have better cart progress, and they continue, and they just win. Then someone goes over to the Zarya, because, as I didn't mention, actually, Reiner was playing the D.Va this whole time. At this point on B, it's very slow fights. They're both teams posturing a lot, but Gladiators are consistently getting cart progress because, now that someone's on the Zarya, he can't really go down and contest it very easily, and Checkmate is more focused on other duels around the map and things like that, so he doesn't actually pressure it either. So basically, the long fight goes out, Gladiators move the whole time, and they win the one fight that happens, and they progress into C. And both tanks go over to the Winston. And from there, it is all Florida all day. Someone diving onto the backline, not giving Gladiators an inch of space. Hydron finding huge hacks, and Florida was just setting the tempo. Gladiators couldn't do anything, and they looked really strong, and they end up winning the map. Then we go over to Coliseum, which is 119-117 for the Gladiators, but that scoreline kind of fools you because the Gladiators were playing a much tighter game this time, and Florida really only got together at the very end. So Florida playing their Sombra, Tracer, Winston, and Ana again, but Gladiators adapting, playing the Tracer, Sojourn, Doom, Ana, Lucio, and they're just playing faster than Hydron can set up the engagement, basically brute forcing Florida back with the Sojourn specifically because there's a lot of long sidelines where he can really get some good angles and get some big damage off, whether it be on someone or the backline or whoever it is. So they basically push to the checkpoint in just 2 fights. And then at that point, they switch over to a Sombra Winston, which is about 4 minutes in. And now the fights become less super fast, don't let Hydron do his thing, and they become a lot slower because that actually benefits them now that they're in the lead. And it was looking like Gladiators all day until the absolute end where, Florida get a couple fight wins together, get some good ultimate usage, find some good value picks, and then they just kind of go on to it. Because checkmate, gets a pulse on the Reiner, which gets them to the checkpoint, and then someone gets a primal. He's able to secure the checkpoint off of the primal. Despite Nano Reiner also being primal and making a lot of space, he gets EMP'd. Sermajet gets a nice beat out. And it looks like Florida could actually win this map in the overtime. Checkmate, he kills Kevster with a pulse bomb. Um, but this time, Reiner's able to live long enough. Kevster comes back. He gets a 2K pulse, and he ends up closing out the series. But it was very close multiple times. So this was a pretty close match as well. And then finally, we have the Toronto Defiant against the New York Excelsior, which is a 3-2 reverse sweep for the New York Excelsior, as all Toronto fans cry. So Toronto, they're playing Hisu Finale, Hoppa, Chorong, Twilight, and New York playing Yaki, Flora, Kellen, Ho1, and Ansunjae. With Toronto, winning Oasis 2-0 was not bad. And they look pretty good until they don't. So, Gardens ends up being 100-99 for Toronto. They're playing their Sombra Reaper Zarya comp. New York playing a Tracer's Sojourn, Winston on a Lucio. And Hoppa's just walking into them. And basically, they're just aggressing into New York. The only time New York was really winning was if they're finding a quick pick on Finale or something like that. And Hoppa's just walking into them. Yaki does come alive, and he gets a lot of kills in the overtime. But Kellen ends up jumping off the map in Primal. So it doesn't really work out. Toronto capped the first match. The first Gardens, 100-99. Then City Center, we had 100-47 victory with Hoppa switching over to the Diva now. And Toronto play cards, but he gets hacked and antied and taken out of mech as the Diva way is. But Hisu has realized that, Yaki is kind of the GOAT, so he stays back, always looking for a Yaki hack, is able to pick him off early, burning down Kellen and Primal, things like that too. And Hisu really carrying the squad here. And, it just ends up being a Toronto win. They're just getting more value. Then we get Kings Row, which is a 3-2 for Toronto. Gang Ninja comes in for Ansunjae, with Toronto on the offense playing, again, their Reaper Zarya composition, and New York playing Tracer Ash this time with the Winston on a Zen. And Hoppa's still just walking on them. He walks up the stairs, gets onto the high ground, goes through, and Toronto cap A pretty fast. Then Flora goes off of the Ash onto the Sojourn. And it's just basically, how much can Hisu really mitigate? And Kellen going in when he gets hacked or nanoed or whatever. How can he stop Yaki? And they basically roll into C. And then they continue to roll. Hisu gets a nice EMP. They do stabilize towards the very end there with 4 minutes left, but then, Finale just walks at them because that's what Toronto's comp is meant to do, and they cap with 330. So we get New York on their offense with playing a Tracer, Sojourn, Winston again, and just Toronto, staying with the tried and true. So we got Kellen jumping onto Hoppa, and he gets beamed down. But then the next time he comes back, actually forces Hoppa back, and New York take 2 ticks. Then they use Nano Clock on Flora to secure the final one. And then Finale, once again, walking on them as he does. However, they don't cleanly win the fight, so they are forced to give away that first corner in a bit. And then New York end up running it once again with a Nano Clock Flora, and they have 3 minutes and 30 seconds into C, which is what Toronto finished with. However, Toronto stabilized with EMP and walking, as they like to do. And they hold at the cost of 4 ults, but it doesn't really matter because they're able to find enough picks with the Ash Genji Zen composition now. And it just kind of works out. So they look really good. It looks like there should be a clean sweep. But then we go to Dorado. And it's not great because Aldo comes in for Finale and Muse comes in for Hoppa. In Toronto, they're playing an Ash, Tracer, Winston, Brigana. So why did Finale get subbed out for Tracer? Who knows? New York playing Tracer, Ash, Winston on a Zen, and it's not good on the Toronto offense. They're consistently unable to get Hisu into positions where he can carry. He's unable to find the opportunity to hit his shots that he needs to do. He does do it eventually. He gets to A by he gets a nice pick on Yaki. I was going to say Happy, but Yaki. New York give a lot of cards, so then they end up taking that advantage and swinging at him with Charong's mace, and they cap out A. And then they stabilize on B, but what gets Toronto through any part of B, they get held at the end of B, right? But what gets them through it at all is Nano Hisu. He ends up killing 4 and building a Bob, but unfortunately he can't close it out with that Bob because Flora goes crazy. He ends up killing 2, and Toronto get held at the end of B. Now, we get the New York offense, with Chorong goes over to the... Oh, he was already on break, I think, so I don't know. Anyway, Toronto hold pretty good for about 2 minutes. Now Hisu's in a good spot to do things. And New York basically commit Yaki just to stop him from doing things, and once they do, it works out because, they get enough space that they can Bob cart, they can Primal Kellen to victory, and they get through A. And then Kellen was just getting far more value, controlling the high ground than Muse was. Muse was pretty invisible this entire map, to be honest, and Callum was getting a lot more value controlling that high ground. And Hisu was once again unable to get as good positioning, as good opportunity as Flora, and he ends up losing. So New York ends up winning pretty easily. And again, why did Aldo come in to play Tracer? It doesn't make any sense. Finale's your Tracer guy. Why is Aldo in? Coliseum ends up being a 93 to 53 for New York, where they come back into their normal circumstances, and Ansunjae comes back in for Gangnam Jin. And then you get, the Tracer's Reaper Zarya against the Tracer Sojourn Winston composition. But New York, this time, they kind of have some more confidence. They're just diving past Hoppa and going in really fast. So Hisu can't really set up the engages, similar to how Gladiators figured out how to beat the Florida Mayhem. New York do the exact same thing, only it's even easier because they don't need to go as fast with Hoppa. And then Flora on the Sojourn is doing a great job keeping his distance, pumping out big damage down the long sight lines. Hisu goes over to the Ash, and Finale goes over to the Tracer, and it kind of looks like it's going to work out, especially once Hoppa goes Diva and Charon goes Zen, because they get some good wins going. But then Hisu, he comes alive, gets a bunch of kills, goes Bob, but then it kills 3, but he actually dies. And he swaps Sombra. I don't know, maybe it was just a way to get back fast, but I think just stay on the Ash there because it was working out. Anyway, Toronto end up back onto their Sombra Tracer thing, and New York end up winning the fight. And I don't know, Yaki and Flora was just doing the Lord's work this entire map. And then finally Nepal, which is just a sad watching Toronto and their mental collapse. You get a 2-0 from New York. Shrine ends up being 199, but it's not pretty. Flora goes Twilight, or Flora ends up picking Twilight right away, and Toronto are forced to back up. So immediately he switches Moira. And I'm like, no way. You're mentally boomed. You just want Moira in Overwatch League. Why? What are you doing, Twilight? And it just doesn't work. They can't run at anyone. New York is playing Tracer, Sojourn, Winston, Ana, Lucio. You can't really run on the Ana whenever he's a Lucio. Sojourn's up on the high ground. You're just useless. I don't know. They end up flipping the point, and Hoppa goes over to the Diva eventually. Finale just starts walking onto New York when he can, and Twilight gets a cold to stabilize them, but Flora gets an EMP, and then Shoran dies before he can beat, and New York end up closing it out because it just blows my mind. And then Sanctuary, Hoppa goes Diva, and Toronto lose the first fight by Ansunjae booping Twilight off the map. Now, Twilight immediately goes Moira again. It's just a wrap. They're spawn camping. New York gets spawn camping, and Finale goes to the Tracer. It doesn't matter. Twilight insta dies. It's over. It's done. It's a wrap. The franchise went from their peak to losing to New York in 2 games in 2 weeks. I don't know. There's no idea what's going on with these guys. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe for more daily Overwatch content. Deuces.